You know, your identity, it's the most personal story you'll ever know. A story that's constantly being written and rewritten and shared. But who's the author of that story? Well, it's communication. In this explainer, we're going to explore how the conversations we have, from when we're kids all the way to today, literally build who we are.
So let's just start with the biggest question there is. Who are you? And I don't just mean your name or what you do for a living. I mean, deep down, who are you, really? The answer, as you'll see, is way more complex and fascinating than you might think. And it all starts with how we connect with the world.
So here's the thing you've got to understand about the self. It isn't some fixed, unchanging thing you're just born with. Nope. It's much better to think of it as a dynamic process. It's basically a collection of perspectives we soak up from society and then act on. And we learn it all through the simple act of communication.
Okay, so if our identity is built, not born, then what's the blueprint? Where did the plans come from? In this first section, we're going to break down the foundational ways that communication starts to sketch out the person you eventually become. Our sense of who we are is really forged in three main places. First, it starts in the heart of our family. Then it expands out to our peers, our friends, and finally, it gets shaped by the huge landscape of society itself. So let's start right at the beginning, with family. One of the first and most powerful ways our families shape us is through what's called direct definition. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's when they tell you, point blank, who you are. Think of them as the very first labels that get attached to us, and those labels can really stick.
I mean, think about it for a second. Did you ever hear something like, "You're so responsible," and you found yourself trying to live up to that? Or maybe you were told, "You're such a troublemaker," and, well, you kind of fell into that role. These messages are like the first brushstrokes of our self-portrait.
And it's not just direct labels. Families also hand us these identity scripts. These are the rules for living, right? Sometimes they're spoken out loud, sometimes they're just understood. They're the family stories that tell us who we're supposed to be. You know these scripts. They sound like, "In this family, we are responsible people," or that classic advice, "Save your money for a rainy day." These aren't just little sayings. They're basically behavioral blueprints that we absorb, and they end up guiding our choices without us even thinking about it.
And what's so fascinating is that all these early family interactions, they also form our attachment style. This is a huge deal because it becomes the core pattern for how we approach all of our future relationships, all shaped by how our very first caregivers talked to us and met our needs. Okay, let's take a look at this chart. It breaks down the four main attachment styles, and it's actually pretty simple. It's all based on two things: how you view yourself and how you view other people. So if you see both yourself and others in a positive light, that's a secure style. If you have a negative view of yourself but a positive view of others, that's anxious. Flip that. A positive self-view but a negative view of others, that's dismissive. And if you have a negative view of both, that's a fearful style. These patterns can have a huge impact on every relationship we have.
All right, so that's family. But what happens when we step outside that front door? Well, the world suddenly gets a lot bigger, and it's filled with all kinds of mirrors reflecting back to us who we are, or at least who we think we should be.
This brings us to something I think every single one of us does, probably every single day: social comparison. It's that completely human instinct to measure ourselves against other people. Am I smart enough? Am I good enough? We look to our peers to figure out where we stand.
This image here is the perfect metaphor, right? We're all kind of climbing our own wall, but we can't help but look over and see how high other people are, how they're climbing, and we use that to judge our own progress. And this isn't just about rock climbing, it's about our jobs, our relationships, pretty much all of life.
So just think about it for a second. When you're sizing yourself up, maybe at work, maybe in a hobby, who do you measure yourself against? Who are the other people on your climbing wall? Just knowing who they are is a huge first step to understanding how they affect you.
So we've got family, we've got our peers, and then there's the really big one, society. We are constantly swimming in these powerful currents of our culture. Through media, school, everything, we learn society's values about things like race, gender, sexual orientation, and class. And these big ideas carve out deep channels in our identity.
This leads to a really powerful concept called reflected appraisal, or, and I love this name, the looking glass self. The idea is simple, but it is so profound. We don't just see ourselves. We see ourselves through what we think other people see. Our self-concept is a reflection of the judgments we imagine in their eyes. And that's where things get really interesting, because that looking glass can create a self-fulfilling prophecy.
If you believe your boss sees you as a leader, you might start taking more initiative, and you become the leader they expected. The expectation, good or bad, can actually create the reality.
Okay, so we've seen how communication basically builds our identity from the ground up. But what if you're not totally thrilled with the current draft of your story? Well, in our last section, we'll talk about how you can pick up the pen and become an active editor of who you are.
And this is the good news. This is probably the most important thing to take away from all this. Yourself is a process, not a finished product. It is not set in stone. That means you have agency. You can actually influence your own growth and change the direction of your story.
So how do we actually do that? Well, here are 6 practical guidelines. First, you have to commit. Decide what needs a rewrite. Second, gain knowledge. Learn new things to challenge those old, outdated identity scripts. Third, set realistic goals. What does the next chapter actually look like? Fourth, self-disclose. This is huge. Share your goals with people you trust. That creates a new reflection for your looking glass self. Fifth, accept that you are always a work in process. And finally, create a supportive context. Surround yourself with people who reinforce the you want to become.
And if you remember one thing, let it be this. You are always in process. There's no final draft of you. The real goal is just to embrace that journey of becoming, to allow for growth, and yes, for mistakes, and for constant, beautiful change.
So yeah, your identity is a story written by communication. All the labels and scripts and reflections you've picked up along the way, they've written the chapters so far. But the cool part is, you're a co-author. So the only question left is, what are you going to write next?